It's January, the North Sea, not exactly cruise weather. Most cruises sell sunshine, pool decks, and warm islands. But what if winter is actually the better time to do this cruise? We sailed the North Sea in January and discovered 5 things nobody tells you about cruising here in winter. Some of them challenges, and some of them genuinely surprising. And later in the video, I'll mention one version of this cruise that, for many people, completely tips the balance in its favour. So, should you cruise the North Sea in winter? Well, we did. And here are 5 things nobody tells you. The first is the understandable concern about a winter North Sea cruise. Before we get into that, let's briefly look at what I mean by a North Sea cruise. These itineraries usually visit ports like Hamburg, Rotterdam and Zeebrugge. If you're lucky, you might get Amsterdam, although that's becoming less common, and I'll come back to that a bit later. Occasionally there are outliers like Le Havre and Cherbourg. They're typically shorter cruises, around 4 to 7 nights, sailing from UK ports such as Southampton, Dover or Tilbury. Because cruise lines move their ships elsewhere in summer, often to the Mediterranean or Norway, these itineraries tend to run in the cooler seasons, winter and spring and autumn. Most concerns stem from the weather. Without warmth and sunshine, the aesthetic is different, but it's also the practical side of winter that worries people. If it's raining, life on deck becomes less appealing and sightseeing less comfortable. If temperatures drop far enough, you may encounter snow and ice underfoot like we did, which can make mobility tricky. Winter storms can bring stronger winds and more movement at sea, something to bear in mind if you're prone to seasickness. Short daylight hours mean excursions may begin or end in darkness. Sail-away parties are often indoors, if they happen at all. And those inviting cruise features, pools, hot tubs, lounges, outside deck games, are likely to be quiet or even empty. If you've paid for a balcony cabin, you may also find you use it much less than you would on a summer cruise. So, with all that doom and gloom, you might reasonably think, forget it, I'll cruise in summer. But actually, our cruise surprised us. What surprised us most wasn't the cold, it was how beautiful it could be. The weather on our sailing was mixed, grey rain, a winter storm, snow and ice, but also long stretches of clear winter sunshine. And something about the season changed how we experienced each place. Winter light had its own different quality, lower, softer, and more reflective. A snow-covered Hamburg felt crisp and luminous, pale skies bright against its historic buildings, and warm cafes offering genuine refuge rather than simple convenience. From our balcony in Rotterdam, the view was sweeping, atmospheric in a way that summer light might have flattened. And Bruges, under a cold grey sky, felt deeper in tone. Russet facades glowed softly, chocolate shop windows shone like jewels, and church bells carried clearly through the winter air. With fewer visitors, the cities felt less staged. We weren't weaving through crowds, we were moving through places that felt lived in. Sail-ins and sail-aways were quieter too. No blazing sunsets or sail-away bands on deck, just muted dawns and dusks with their own kind of beauty. Sailing from a snowy Hamburg down the Elbe felt almost cinematic. One morning in Zeebrugge, we opened the curtains to find something rather different from the Mediterranean. The big, industrial port had its own quiet drama in the pre-dawn light. On board, the atmosphere shifted too. Decks were emptier, outside spaces less inviting, and sometimes closed altogether. Life moved indoors. Lounges and cafes became the centre of gravity, a shared warmth against the weather outside. Winter didn't diminish the cruise, it changed its character. But, of course, there are some practical realities to consider. First, have a good think about whether a balcony is worth it for you. Balcony cabins are larger and give you natural light and fresh air, but in winter they can be too cold to sit out on for long, so that morning coffee or pre-dinner drink may end up happening indoors. You'll need to decide whether that extra cost still makes sense for you. Seasickness preparation is also sensible. Even on shorter itineraries, you'll usually have sea days, and the North Sea can occasionally be rough. I tend to take an over-the-counter medication and wear seasickness wristbands as well. If you do start feeling unwell, sometimes simply looking at the horizon can help, or going to bed and closing your eyes. In the worst case scenario, the ship's medical centre can give you an injection, which usually sorts things out quickly. Cruise prices can vary quite a bit. The shortest cruises, particularly those that still visit Amsterdam, can be surprisingly expensive, and if you're travelling during school holidays, expect to pay more. But outside those periods, for example, the 7-night cruise we took starting on the 4th of January, prices can be very reasonable. It's also worth checking late sailing offers if you're flexible. Another thing to bear in mind is that the atmosphere on board can vary depending upon the sailing. During school holidays, there will naturally be more families travelling, which changes the energy of the ship a little. And on some of the shorter 4-night itineraries, the mood can become quite lively. Because the cruise is shorter, people often treat it as a celebratory break. On one Amsterdam 4-night sailing, we even enjoyed a spontaneous conga around the ship's pub to 500 miles, with the waiters joining in, and that was on Cunard. Port logistics can occasionally be tricky too. Hamburg worked very well for us. Cunard provided frequent shuttle buses into the city centre. Rotterdam was different. There was no shuttle, so we relied on walking, although there were taxis or public transport. The walking was slightly awkward because of snow and ice on the ground, and the only areas cleared were the cycle lanes, so everyone used them, which I suspect annoyed the cyclists rather a lot. Zeebrugge is another example. This enormous port is often used as a gateway to Bruges. Cruise excursions are available, but they can be quite expensive and time restricted. We chose to take a taxi instead, which cost about the same and dropped us right in the centre of Bruges with complete flexibility. Another small quirk of winter cruising is what I call the Christmas hangover effect. If you're travelling after Christmas like we did on the 4th of January, we assumed the Christmas decorations would have been taken down, but many were still up, both on board and in the cities we visited. In Bruges, the Christmas market in the main square had closed, but not yet been dismantled, which gave the square a slightly melancholy feeling. Some travellers may enjoy that lingering festive atmosphere, others might find it a little tiresome once the season has passed. And a word about Amsterdam. Cruise visits to Amsterdam are becoming less common because the city has decided to limit cruise ships. Concerns about overcrowding and pollution mean fewer ships are allowed to dock, and many itineraries now call at Rotterdam instead, with excursions into Amsterdam from there. That's a pity in some ways, because in Amsterdam the cruise terminal sits right beside the historic centre. You step off the ship and within minutes you're immersed in canals, bicycles and those wonderfully narrow canal houses. Rotterdam, by contrast, is a modern working port city with a completely different look and feel. Winter cruising also brings some unexpected advantages. Fares can sometimes be lower, particularly on longer itineraries outside school holidays. And if you decide a balcony isn't essential, that can reduce the cost further. Many North Sea cruises are also home port to home port, which means no flights and no airport stress. Simply arriving at the terminal and stepping on board can feel wonderfully easy. Cities can feel very different outside peak tourist season. With fewer crowds, you're able to experience places in a more authentic way, wandering streets that feel like real working cities rather than summer attractions. And winter light across Northern Europe can be remarkable. One foggy morning in Rotterdam, the harbour dissolved into pale greys and silvers, almost like an impressionist painting. And the snowy banks of the Elbe at night felt quietly magical. Finally, there's one particular version of these cruises that many travellers especially enjoy. Earlier I mentioned that one factor might tip the balance in favour of a winter North Sea cruise, and for many people this is it. In early December, many cruise lines run Christmas market sailings to cities like Hamburg, Bruges and sometimes Amsterdam. Arriving in northern European cities when the Christmas markets are in full swing, with lights, seasonal food and winter music, can feel wonderfully atmospheric. Who is it for? A winter North Sea cruise clearly isn't for everyone. If you're dreaming of long days by the pool, sunshine and deck parties, this probably isn't the voyage for you. If icy pavements or the possibility of rough seas make you feel uncomfortable, it's worth thinking carefully. And because more passengers spend time indoors, the lounges and cafes can sometimes feel a little busier. But for the right traveller, it can be wonderful. If you enjoy atmosphere and mood, if you like cities outside the busy tourist season, if you appreciate quiet sea days and cosy cafes, then winter cruising may suit you perfectly. Photographers often love it. Travellers who prefer the feeling of exploring rather than simply holidaying often do too. And if you enjoy that sense of warmth and companionship, perhaps sitting by a fire in a Bruges bar while the cold air drifts outside, winter travel can be deeply satisfying. Before I give my considered conclusion, if you've cruised the North Sea in winter yourself, I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more of our sailing, I have a full video about our North Sea cruise on Queen Anne coming soon. If you found this video helpful, do consider liking it or subscribing to the channel and sharing it with anyone thinking about taking a winter cruise. In closing, perhaps the best way to think about it is this: winter doesn't make the North Sea cruise worse. It simply reveals a different side to it. I'm David from Curious to Travel. Stay curious.